You will have a ton of companies out there who, will have been running some testing with Google Optimize. It's gone away. They don't want to pay for another, so they've just abandoned that altogether.
Welcome to episode 108 of No-Hacks-Show, a weekly podcast dedicated to letting smart people talk to you about better online experiences. This is another episode we're doing as part of our partnership with Experimentation Elite. And for those of you who do not know, Experimentation Elite is the UK's premier experimentation and conversion rate optimization event happening in London on December 7th. So if you haven't done it already, go to experimentationelite.com and get your ticket today. My guest will do a 30-minute session at the December event about making experimentation more strategic. And this is something we'll discuss today. So if you want to learn about that, stay tuned, listen to the episode, and you will learn a lot. He is Digital Experience Director at Journey Further, and over his 21-year career, he has helped brands like Sky, GHD, Trainline, and Liberty London, among others, put analytics and experimentation at the heart of their digital innovation and brand strategy. It's my pleasure to say this. Jonny Longden, welcome to the podcast. Pleasure to have you on.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for having me.
So you have been in the field of experimentation for 20 plus years. In this field, that is a very, very long time. So, yep. And you have a lot of skills that most people probably don't have over those years. But what is the one thing that you would say you're not good at?
Not good at?
Yep.
Oh, gosh. That's a left field question. I don't know. I think probably I would. The last thing I would describe myself being is creative. I guess really, like in the sense of, like take it to a really basic level. You want me to draw a picture or something like that? It's not going to be very good. So my career has always focused on using data and analytics to understand what you might want to do creatively, but actually designing things, doing things creatively, that's not really my forte. So I'd say probably design-based creative work.
That's a great answer. And do you feel it ever held you back in your career, or no?
No, I don't think so, because I think like you learn to work with people that are creative. I mean, actually, creativity is a super broad thing, right? You can be creative about the use of data and things like that, but I'm talking about the sort of visual, artistic sort of plastic art sort of things. But no, I think you learn how to work with people that do that, and how to work well with people that do that. A long time ago, I worked for an agency called RGA. They're a very big global agency, and they do all sorts of things. But at the heart, it's kind of a creative agency. So I worked with a lot of very, very talented creative people. And one of the things I learned whilst working there was just how fundamentally different ways of thinking creative people have, and it's interesting to sort of figure out how to sort of tie together and communicate with people like that. And so one of the challenges for anybody working in data and experimentation and things like that is to bridge that gap and to understand how to work well with creative people, and to understand the different ways of thinking that creative people have, and to ensure that you don't necessarily think that you're right, they're wrong, and things like that. So it's all about coming together with people who are creative.
That's a great answer, and it is. Soft skills are equally important as really the hard skills that we need for work. So the topic today, and this is from the description of the talk, the episode title is Breaking Out of the CRO Pigeonhole. For those of you who have no idea what that means, could you give us a brief explainer?
Yeah, absolutely. So like you mentioned, I've been in experimentation, CRO, since it was invented, really, and even before that, before I got into digital, my career was really focused around experimenting with direct mail campaigns and telemarketing campaigns and things like that. So I've seen the CRO and experimentation industry grow, since its outset, really. And I think the history of it is quite interesting, and has brought it to a place which is maybe different from where it should be in a way. And if you think about it, really a lot of what CRO is based on the fact that it's been done as this kind of tactical thing. So for a long time, probably going back maybe 10 years, a lot of CRO was done by consultants who would go around selling it on a no-win, no-fee basis. So consultants would go and say, I'll put this tag on your site, I'm going to run tests on the site, I'm going to increase your conversion rate, and you don't have to pay me unless you get a winner. And I'll take 1% of the annual revenue benefit of the winners that you get. And that's just one example of different ways that what people know of CRO has come from some of the strange commercial ways that it's been sold. And so if you look at CRO in a lot of companies today, it is basically an exercise in kind of tweaking elements of UX to try and trick the website into delivering a little bit more revenue. It gets measured according to the revenue benefit of individual things that happen. And you've got all these sort of strange practices that are basically based on the way that it's been done in the past. And if you just temporarily just forget about all that, I like to give people a slightly different way of thinking about the whole concept, which is just think about anything great that's happened in the history of modern civilization. So think about space flight, modern advances in medicine, any kind of major advance in modern technology and things like that. This has all come about from the application of the scientific method. The scientific method was discovered in the course of the Enlightenment 300 years ago-ish. I'm making that up, but and it's really a way of applying an attitude which is about not taking what people say as truth without investigating it, exploring things, observing things, doing things iteratively, failing and things like that. And businesses are all entities that are trying to achieve something great. So why would you not try and learn from the people who got somebody on the moon? Do you know what I mean? So really, experimentation should be this thing that just sits within this wider process of innovation. And to just bring it back to the answer to your question, I know that all sounds a little bit lofty, but at the end of the day, I think that a lot of CRO is basically this exercise in sort of messing around with UX, moving buttons around and things like that. And what people don't realize is that experimentation has this opportunity to help you answer really big strategic questions that you have, big problems that the business has. There's no reason why it can't do that. It's just not seen like that because it's never been done like that. So, you have businesses where they'll have, people in boardrooms sitting thinking about big challenges that they've got, hiring McKinsey to go and produce a deck for £500,000. Meanwhile, there's somebody in a marketing team over there tinkering around with buttons on the website. And why are those things not brought together? You can answer big questions using experimentation if you do it in the right way. And companies have these questions, how do we appeal to a younger audience? Should we launch into this new international market next year? Should we get rid of this whole product line that we've got? How do we increase our profitability? All of these things, if you approach them in the right way, can be answered using the concept of experimentation, the concept of the scientific method, just in the same way that if you say, how should we get to the moon? Then you can use the process of the scientific method and experimentation to help you get there. So that's ultimately what my talk will be about, is how can you take experimentation, break it out of this niche little thing that's called CRO, and take it to a wider audience in the organization to help people achieve things that they're trying to achieve.
Sounds like a fascinating talk that I'm very sorry I will miss in person, but I'm sure there will be some notes and some blog posts to follow. Back to Experimentation Elite, though. For those of you who have never attended, and a lot of the listeners probably never have, especially those who are not in the UK, how would you summarize the event? Like, why should someone go to Experimentation Elite?
Yeah, so there's really not very much else in the UK like that I'm aware of. So it's a conference and event that is focused on educating people in the profession of experimentation. It's pitched well because there are a combination of talks that are about quite advanced things, but there are also talks that are about the more sort of foundational elements of experimentation. But if you are in CRO, if you are, involved in the process of running experiments on websites, or, for a business at all, then, it's a good conference to help you learn about some of the more advanced elements of it. So I would say, first of all, you're going to learn, but two, there isn't very much else like that in the UK right now at all. That I know of, there aren't dedicated conferences that are just focused on experimentation, although there might be others that have more broad coverage over other aspects of digital marketing. So, unless you want to travel to other countries and you want to really learn about experimentation, that's the place to do it at the moment in the UK.
That's the best summary that anyone could think of. So back to the main topic, breaking out of the CRO pigeonhole and adding structure to your experimentation. You have a very long track record of building experimentation programs, obviously. And what are some of the biggest challenges that you can remember facing over the years?
So there are a lot. I think it's quite a common problem that most people be aware of. But the number one is really the culture and attitude of the organization. There are a lot of businesses out there who start doing experimentation, but at the end of the day, there are a lot of people in those businesses who don't really believe in testing things. And that's very, very hard to change. It's an unfortunate thing. I've done quite a lot of thinking over the years about why that is. And ultimately, I believe it's about the nature of hierarchical management structures. Because, most businesses in this day and age have the same sort of hierarchical management structures that come from the industrialization era. And if you think about it, we as businesses hire people and remunerate them based on their past experience. So if you want to get paid more, you need more past experience, and a business will hire someone and pay them a lot of money because they have done things before in other companies. And so how do you justify your salary? Well, you justify your salary by bringing that experience into that new company, and that means bringing your opinion into that company. So somebody can sort of agree with the whole concept of experimentation and be enthusiastic about it, but when push comes to shove, if they are challenged as to their value within the organization, they're going to have to start demonstrating how they're bringing what they've done before and their opinion based on what they've done before. So, it's an unfortunate thing that is the nature of culture in our businesses, but that's ultimately what will sort of hinder growing an experimentation program. And unfortunately, there's not a hell of a lot you can do about that. Some companies are just more attuned to it than others. I think at the moment, I run a large agency team where we run a lot of retained experimentation programs for clients. But I personally do management consulting with much bigger organizations that are trying to scale experimentation internally. And I would say the challenges that those kind of companies face are very similar, which are generally around the culture within product engineering environments. So, mostly what companies are trying to do is to transform their product engineering processes to ensure that experimentation is embedded within those processes, and perhaps build a center of excellence model in order to be able to do that. But you then start to get into issues with the fundamental nature of how product engineering itself works. And product teams are typically KPI'd on just delivering stuff, basically. So they're KPI'd on shipping features, and that's very, very common. And what that means is that, for a product team that has a number of developers that are KPI'd on delivering stuff, they just have to keep work moving through the product team. And so what that work is, where it came from, and what it's going to deliver commercially is a little bit irrelevant, really. Like, it's not part of the KPI process. So that kind of hinders the ability to do experimentation, because in a way, experimentation is a way of risk managing product engineering investment. And when it's done properly, you should be gatekeeping ideas, validating them first, and then making sure that they're a good idea before they go into product teams. But when you've already invested in developer resource, and then you're really sort of KPIing them on their throughput, those developers don't really want to worry about what it is they're actually delivering. They just need to work, and they need to not be sitting around twiddling their thumbs. So that sort of nature of the way that product engineering works, and the KPIs within them, and the whole sort of concept of agile development is the challenge, really. And that is not that difficult to change, really. It's just about getting people to understand the right ways to do things. So I think, in a nutshell, that whole concept is what I talk about the most with the kinds of clients that I consult with at the moment.
Right. I'm really glad you mentioned web developers, because later we'll get to experimentation-driven web development. You have a LinkedIn article from 2020, but I guess it will never get stale or get old, because those principles will always apply. So we'll get to that a bit later. But one thing from your LinkedIn bio as well, it says, regardless of the size of your business, I believe the answer is to put data and experimentation at the heart of your operations. We help you do that. What about the small, like really, really small businesses? I'm not saying 10 visits a day or anything that small, but smaller than big enough for proper experimentation program.
Yeah. Well, let's think about the science world again. So, the experimentation and CRO community has this sort of belief that, you need lots of data to run experiments, and you have some quite elitist attitudes out there of people who believe that, that only the biggest companies should be doing this. Now, that is kind of true. There are, you do need volumes of data to run controlled experiments. But like I say, let's think about the science world, right? So there are tons and tons of fields of science where controlled experimentation is not possible. It's either unethical, or there are not it's not possible to gather the right data. But you don't then get scientists saying, "Oh well, let's just not bother then. We'll just guess." They find a way. Okay, so like the wider concept of the scientific process is simply to use observation in order to learn things, to use iterative approaches to trying things, getting forms of validation and feedback, and ultimately learning and developing, as opposed to using dogmatic or authoritative, forms of opinion. And, there are lots and lots and lots of fields of science where they don't do experimentation, and yet they still find ways. So this is the thing, there are lots and lots of, people out there who think, you either run a test or you don't. And if you don't do anything. But, experimentation is just a very good form of validation. There are other forms of validation. And even, to an extent, as long as a company is going about things with the right attitude of trying things, seeing how they feel about it, going back to the drawing board, that's still better than just completely guessing. If anybody's ever read the book The Lean Startup, that's ultimately what that's about. You won't find any mention in there of statistically significant A/B testing. It's about the concept of trying things, seeing how they work, getting feedback from the market, pivoting to a different area. That's the concept. So anybody can do that. It's just, a technical question of how you gather feedback and how you do validation. And yes, for very small companies, they may not be able to run testing, but they can still use the wider end-to-end approach. And that's what I'm talking around, really. Like, we as an industry have this sort of strange obsession with software and A/B testing, and that's become almost the be-all and end-all of people, just see it as a software solution and a thing, A/B testing. But if you're not focusing on the rest of the process, the rest of the scientific attitudinal process, then that's a little bit by the by anyway. So that's what I mean by that.
And to help prove your point, Google Optimized Sunset has been the biggest topic of the year in the industry by far, and I don't really think it deserves to be, because it just isn't that important.
Absolutely. And very interestingly, you will have a ton of companies out there who will have been running some testing with Google Optimize. It's gone away. They don't want to pay for another, so they've just abandoned that altogether. But that's because they see it as simply a software tool that provides a tactical benefit. They're not thinking about the wider process of, understanding problems and opportunities, developing those as ideas, validating them as ideas, trying things, the cyclical process of development and innovation like that. And to me, that's far more important than any specific technical aspect of how you do it. It's it's that sort of attitude of critical thinking and iterative development that you want to instill in businesses than necessarily exactly how they go about it.
Before even thinking about the tools, absolutely, or software. So back to that experimentation-driven web development article that you wrote almost 4 years ago now. But like I said, it will be valid 5, 10, 20, maybe even 50, who knows with the AI, but probably 50 years from now. So the process of experimentation-driven web development, I'll just see, there's 5 components of it, and that is process, people and skill, tech, execution, and mindset. Could you just quickly explain the thought behind experimentation-driven web development?
Yeah. Well, number one, where that sort of comes from originally is that you have quite a lot of people out there who, whether they consciously think this or it's a subconscious assumption that they have, think that CRO is essentially a marketing channel. So, you got quite a lot of people who go, we've got PPC, SEO, CRO. They've all got 3 letters. They're all kind of similar. And then it gets treated as a marketing channel. And you will actually, you get people including it in their P&L in the same place as marketing channels. And it absolutely is not marketing. It is a form of web development. So one of the places that article came from was this, trying to explain to people that it is actually a form of web development. What you're doing is ultimately making better decisions about things that you should do to your website, which is web development. It is not, a marketing channel. So that's the starting point. But then, how do you do it? Now, if you look at a lot of companies that are running web development, if you take like a sort of a lowest common denominator, I'd say you've got companies who have a web development agency and they've got a retainer for that web development agency, and that company has a list of stuff and they just put stuff in that list. What is it? What's getting done? Well, it's usually just somebody thinking, well, maybe we should redesign our checkout. We've got a load of retainer hours left. What shall we do? Or well, let's build some landing pages or something. It's not really thought about. So that article is really trying to kind of show people the process that they should go through to be doing a more data-driven form of web development, where you're actually using research to think about the things that you should be doing and how you go about it. And it's not necessarily super easy to do. So the things in that article are what I class to be the building blocks of you can call it experimentation culture, you can call it data-driven web development. But there's 5 in that article, and I've probably added another one that I talk about now. So the 6 things that I talk about. And number one, innovation strategy. So if you think about, let's go back to the world of science. If you want to get somebody to the moon, that is your goal, and experimenting on a little aspect of rocket propulsion sits within the context of that ultimate goal. So, if you're going to run a good innovation process on your digital content, that needs to be aligned well to your business strategy and profitability and things like that. And having a really good way of articulating strategy at the level that it can be trickled down into actual things that you execute is super important. So one, have you got a strategy for what it is you're actually trying to achieve? Two, have you got the right tools and technology in order to be able to do that? And that's not just about A/B testing tools, but it's also about insight tools, project management tools, and things like that. Number three, process, which I would these days talk about more in the context of an operating system. So operating system to me is at its basic level project management software that allows you to organize and track everything that you're doing from an ideation perspective and from a research and a development perspective. But it's also the way that you encapsulate ways of doing things and frameworks for how things work and methodologies for how you measure things. And you will not get very far scaling a program of experimentation across a company without something like that. Four, have you got the right people and skills? So there are very simple things like lots of people don't understand statistics when they're running testing. It's quite remarkable how many people don't actually understand how to measure tests and yet will measure tests. There are all sorts of other skill sets required. The next one is an interesting one, which you won't hear a lot of people talk about, which is basically the process of embedding experimentation into wider production processes. And this is what really I'm getting to when I talk about data-driven web development. A lot of businesses, they have somebody running experiments way over there in the corner of the marketing team, and then a web development agency doing things, and they're very, very disjointed. The CRO person will find something that's worth doing and try and create a ticket for the engineering team over there to create. But that doesn't make any sense when you think about it, really. A/B testing is a way of validating the things that you should do in web development, and therefore it's basically just a better way of making decisions about the things that should happen in web development. So those things should be integrated and they should be tied together into a single process. So how is experimentation working with the production side of things? And the last building block is culture, really, which is about senior buy-in and people's enthusiasm and ability to want to test and want to fail and things like that, which, if you type experimentation culture into Google, that is what you'll find articles about. And to me, that is important, but it's the icing on the cake, because if you want senior people to buy into something, there has to be something for them to buy. It's a bit futile just going around trying to convince people of the concept of experimentation when there's nothing for them to see and to understand and to get their hands on as to how it's going to work. So yeah, those are the building blocks that I talk about, and that's really the model that I use when I consult with clients as well to roadmap how they need to build those things into their organization and to gap and analyze where the most significant areas are that they need help with.
The reason I asked this is because I consider myself to be sort of a semi-retired web developer. I had a decade in the field, and to me, it kind of goes back to that lean startup methodology. If development is not experimentation driven, you could waste not only money, but you could waste months developing a feature that maybe you never needed, maybe the users don't feel like they need it. So this article that I will put in the episode notes, the link to it in the episode notes, I think really encapsulates all of that and the way web development especially should be approached with experimentation at its core. Before we close the episode, what is something I should have asked you today, but I didn't?
I don't know. One of the, one of the things that I sort of think about, talk a lot about at the moment is what are the problems within our industry? Where are the sort of sticking points within?
What
our
are the problems within our industry? Let me.
I touched on one of them, which was elitist attitude. So within the experimentation field, there are lots of different types of people with different backgrounds, and one of the big challenges that I see at the moment is that if you look at it, I mean, I go around talking to all sorts of different companies that are running experimentation, and the fact of the matter is that there are hundreds and hundreds of companies out there who are running A/B tests who may as well not be bothering because they do not understand how to do it. And one of the things that I try and do from a content point of view is educate people to do that. But it's a big sort of issue, I think, in our industry. And there's a lot of people out there who believe that they shouldn't actually be testing at all. That actually only the biggest companies should be running tests and things like that. So, but for me, the biggest challenge is when you look at it, we have hundreds and hundreds of businesses out there. Not with Google Optimize anymore, but with other tools. Just trying their best to run tests, but it's something that is so easy to do wrong without ever realizing that you could have a marketing team running tests for years thinking that they're making good decisions, and they're actually making appalling decisions. And so how do we collectively solve that problem? I don't actually have the answer. Is the answer to have better tooling that sort of does things for people? Is it an education thing? But at the end of the day, there are a lot of people out there doing stuff that is relatively pointless, really. So yeah, that I would say is a bit of an elephant in the room for our industry, and I'm sort of constantly thinking about the ways that we might collectively solve that.
That's a very interesting take, and probably goes back to different backgrounds of people coming to this industry. And there's no, with web development, it's coding, and everyone knows to code, and everyone sort of has the same background. With CRO, I mean, just the people that I have talked to on this podcast, I usually ask them, how did you get into this? And the response is that I've had poker players, I've had web developers, there's designers, musicians, like anything you can imagine, you can find it in the CRO world. And I guess that will sort of get cleaned up in the next decade or so, because we will have people with... Yeah, go ahead.
The issue is the way I kind of describe it to people is... if you've never done anything to do with PPC before, and you sign up a Google Ads account and create some campaigns, then you might not be doing that very well, but you'll be driving some traffic to your site, and it will work. But if you sign up to a cheap A/B testing tool, run a test, and then 2 days later go, this one's got a higher conversion rate than that one, let's put that live. It's not that you're not doing it very well. You literally may as well not bother, because and that is what people do. So I talk to a lot of companies where they show me what they're doing, and they do that. They don't even look at the statistical significance. So that's the issue, is that it's not that there are degrees of how well you do it. There is a lot of area where you actually may as well not bother. So in fact, you'd probably be better off not bothering.
You can do damage. You can do damage. Exactly. That's fun times to be alive and part of the optimization industry, for sure. Jonny, I want to thank you for being a guest on the No Hacks Show. I believe everyone's looking forward to Experimentation Elite on December 7th. Make sure you say hi to Jonny when you're there. And to those of you listening to this episode, please consider rating, reviewing, and sharing with someone who will find it useful. And I will talk to you next week.